It's okay. It's okay. We'll just pass around one. It's okay. We should get going.
How does this present it if you want?
Oh, you know WebEx?
No, this is perfect. You want to view it like this? Before, I think you guys had it like
We
as the open
can't
slideshow.
get out of slideshow mode or the monitor working.
Okay.
Fine. Get into
I think it's
slide
fine
one.
then.
Just
Yeah.
slide it, I don't care.
So
I don't know why. I did it. I don't know why that.
maybe it's a different window actually open. There we go.
Final one.
This one. There you go.
Yeah.
That's the final one. Right?
Yes.
You
Because this.
Right, that's right. Okay, good. Let's go. Excellent. Good afternoon, everybody. Hello. Hi, thanks for coming out. So, I'm going to give you a little update about what we're doing on the Welikia Project over the last 8 years or so. Thanks for coming. And we're going to give you a short update about what we've been up to, and give you an example from the Bronx Zoo, and kind of show some of the fun things we've been up to. I feel like an old person, and I feel like there's so many new people at WCS since the Manhattan work came out that I would just start with that, just to situate a little bit what we're doing, and also to share some of the things that have happened since 2009. So just to go back a little bit in history, I came to WCS almost 20 years ago from California, from New York City, and to work in the Global Conservation Program and to try and bring landscape ecology to the work of WCS. And through a series of accidents that led me into this project to try and figure out what the landscape of Manhattan was like 400 years ago, this same place. If we can imagine the long, skinny, wooded island of Manhattan when Henry Hudson sailed into the harbor on September 12, 1609. And this is the traditional moment that the history of New York City happens. And all about the Dutch and Hudson and et cetera, and colonial claims that came after that. But what Manhattan really helped people to see is there's also a natural story, a story about ecology and wildness and wild places. We discovered that Manhattan had 54 different ecosystem types, 1,000 different species, a whole series of human cultures that had been living here for almost 8,000 years before Europeans showed up. It had a kind of sustainability and resilience that the city is still hungering for, something that really makes this place last for the long term. And all this work about the things that we do in the zoos, I think it's complementary to it, just like what we try and do in the zoos. I mean, why do we have zoos, aquaria in New York City? It's because we want people to come here and to have an experience of wildlife and a sense of wildness that they wouldn't otherwise be able to have. And of course, this mission that we have in our zoological facilities is something that's a long-term historical endeavor. or 120 years old, founded, in this place in the 1890s because there were, these people that were concerned about what was the future of wildlife in America and on the planet as a whole. And if you look back in the original founding documents of the society, it has this dual mission to connect people, New Yorkers, to nature through our facilities and try and save wildlife in all the places they live around the world. And in fact, that's why John hired me to come here to do these things, to help our field programs with landscape ecology to figure out how to do jaguars or rhinos or spectacled bear or all the many different species. The Mana Project was successful way beyond my imagination. I wrote this book to be a bestseller. It was on the cover of National Geographic in September of 2009. We had an exhibition at the museum in the city of New York that attracted 150,000 people to the museum for a 6-month temporary exhibition. We made these large-scale renderings in these big camera views. You can see one on the left. Some of these are still in the lab now. There's one downstairs in the lunchroom. We coupled that with historical imagery of the city and artifacts from the Lenape and told the story about how the ecology of the place has all these analogs to the way the city works today. Manhattan and Manhattan are more similar than we might think. Then others built a spectacular website that allows people to double-click on any block in Manhattan, see all the plants and animals used to live in that block. It really poured this story about wildlife and nature into the heart, into the little blocks where people live in New York City. Gave them something to talk about that they didn't know before. Education program, we wrote a series of education curricula that are still widely used across the city today. When talks downtown, it's not uncommon for 7- and 8-year-olds to come up and shake my hand because they've heard about Manhattan and Lenape. I think the true measure of the work has been things that other people did without, beyond our control and our agency. Dutch published this commemorative coin in 2009 with Manhattan on one side and our data about Manhattan on the other. Artists used our work. This is a great project by Heidi Nielsen and Nicholas Frazier where they chalked in the names of ecosystems along 14th Street in exactly the places where those boundaries used to be, and then watched over the course of the day as the people walked by, oblivious and wiped away the chalk. The artist Maya Lin was working on a series of pin rivers a number of years ago, and she created one based on stream coverage of Midtown Manhattan, sold for $45,000 at the Pace Gallery. Dries is a gardener at NYU, and he used our plant list for a block on the NYU campus to plant a woodland garden. And still go down and see right next to the Boats Library near Washington Square Park. People built games on top of our work, Colleen Macklin at the New School, and through the collaboration via Conservation Solutions with Kylie Ingram. Artists have made, their own ideas of the sort of comparison between the two. Written books and novellas, past and about the future. The work. People music, classical music, and some popular music. There was a landscape project that was in the paper earlier this year where Bill McCoy is an audio engineer at the Cornell Laboratory of Ornithology, and he used sound files. Ibrahim's a sort of video and media artist, and they come together to soundscapes of specific places in Manhattan. So you can actually hear the sounds of the Collect Pond 400 years ago or the High Line 400 years ago. And it's in 3D space, so as you turn around, you hear the waves of the ocean, or you hear the different kinds of species that would be appropriate the direction you're facing. So that was so successful that when it was done, people kept saying to me, "You're not going to stop, right? You're not just going to stop in Manhattan. What about the Bronx? What about Brooklyn? What Queens and Staten Island?" And so, since the last 8 years, we've been continuing to work on this project that we call the Welikia Project. And Welikia is a Lenape word. It means my good home. First one, the Manhattan Project, because that's Manhattan is actually a Lenape word from the Lenape name. The Lenape, the Native Americans, didn't have a name for all of New York City, so that's we looked up a talking dictionary and found this word. It's what you'd say to someone when they come to your wigwam or to your longhouse. You'd say, "Welikia, welcome to my good home," and that's the way we want people to think about the environment of New York City. been compiling this kind of information across a much larger extent. All of New York City and sort of adjacent parts of New Jersey and Long Island and Westchester. Studying where the original shoreline was 400 years ago with sea level rise and in this a little bit of sea level descent. Adding in all the rivers and the streams and the beaches and different kinds of wetlands, different salt marshes and freshwater wetlands of the city. This part of the work we didn't know when we started, but it's been particularly relevant given Hurricane Sandy. There's been purple places on this map for the places that flooded during Sandy. Because of course it's this area, it's not what it was 400 years ago. It's developed. It's arguably the most developed place on the face of the planet, which creates another sort of contrast, I think, that relates to our work on say, the human footprint and our sort of understanding why conservation is so important here in the 21st century. So that's the introduction, and now I'm going to pass over to Chris, who's going to talk to you a little bit about the Bronx Zoo part of the program.
And we're going to start off with a little intro video from The Get Down. I don't know if anyone watched this on Netflix, but there was this cool moment that when Moses was talking about the Bronx being a prairie over 100 years ago, so we just thought that was cool. So.
And less than 100 years ago, the Bronx was all prairie.
Winston, what are you rambling on about? What's going on? You're going to make the boys late for school.
How am I supposed to teach them discipline? You keep undermining me.
Yeah, so the Bronx was prairies, but not only prairies. So as Eric mentioned before, all the information on where the streams were, the wetlands were, what the topography was, all that had to come from somewhere, and for us, it was mostly from these old maps. So here we have, this is where we are now. So this red polygon right here is the Bronx Zoo, and this little red dot right here is the CGC. So, and we'll use this as a reference throughout all of these maps I'll show you. So this maps we have for the area, this is the Skinner and Taylor map. So they were two English cartographers that made maps for the British Army during the Revolution. And again, here you can really see a prairie-like-esque Bronx with some forests remnants, and also the Bronx River corridor right here. Again, like all these forests were cut down very early, but there was still a good amount of forested areas still left in the Bronx. Later on, we kind of have this jump in the 1830s of cartography. So this is when scientific cartography really kind of started. And this map was a map by the U.S. Coastal Survey, which was the first scientific agency of the U.S. government. And they started making these maps in the 1830s in New York, and then they spread to the rest of the country. But this is a Renard map. So Renard was, again, the cartographer, and Bronx Zoo was kind of a natural delineator in their cartography. So they had maps, always kind of like a map on the west side and a map on the east side of the Bronx River. So this is the west side map here with West Farms below. Again, still a little village at that time. And the other side of the Bronx River, so the east side, and here we can see some features like Bear Swamp, which was a swampy area right here, to the east of the zoo, which we'll talk about later. After that, we start seeing an explosion post Civil War, where the city really starts coming up. We have a development of the West Farms area here, and we start seeing some familiar names. So here you can see the Leidig Estate, so the Leidig Mansion right here in the lower part of the zoo, but also the tape factory right here in the bend, and also the dam right here that was the Leidig Dam, and the mill down here. And you can see that caused the river flood and kind of create Bronx Lake. Now this map is from 1871, and this is probably the map that has some of the best topography in the area. So this was a map created by the Parks Department at the time, and this is right before the Bronx was officially incorporated into New York City. That happened in 1874. And these red lines that you can kind of see across here are all topographic lines, and this is the kind of data that we use to create those elevation models that Eric showed you before. And you can also see these little streams running through the zoo right here, and this is Cope Stream, which was dammed to create Cope Lake. That's right out here in the front. Yep. So the crown of the building, yeah. This is a map from Beers, from Bien, from the late 1800s, and here we really have this explosion of parkland in the Bronx. You can start seeing Pelham Parkway, and again, Bronx Park officially kind of thing now. Cope Lake wasn't created, but we still see some of these streams that were put in. This is an early plan for the Bronx Zoo. At this point, you can already see Cope Lake now is officially a lake, and there are other lakes that are and little ponds that are spotting the zoo. Some of them were built, some of them weren't, so you can go around and see that. And you get Bronx Lake right here with the dam at the bottom. With a lot of these maps, we basically bring them into the GIS into the computer. We reference them, so we line them up with the real world, and then we trace all the features off of it. And the features, we then synthesize them and kind of come up with a set of canonical layers, like streams, our wetlands, shorelines, all these information then go on that we carry into the modeling process after. But when we use superficial information, we use also bedrock geology. So this is the bedrock geology under the Bronx. So this data comes from old maps from 1903. And so the Bronx Zoo is mostly sitting on this heartland formation, remnant of an island arc that originally slammed in, so like Japan, an island arc that's slowly moving into Asia. We kind of have the same thing that happened in the Bronx, and this island arc slammed into this different formation right here, which is in marble, and kind of created an accidented terrain in the West Bronx. And Inwood Marble is also where this the old path of the Bronx River. The Bronx River originally went down Webster Avenue, and then because of that, it was diverted. So you can kind of see the original path here with this injection of Inwood Marble. And we all have superficial geology, so this is the remnants of the glacier. So most of the stuff up here is till. So as the glacier retreated, it left these different sands, clay, and till. And here, the current Bronx River, we have obviously fluvium, but you can see this old core of the Bronx River right here, which is stratified drift.
So when was the river shift? Sometime during the last glaciation event, I think 18,000 years ago. In this theory, there was a block of ice that stocked the water, and so it gouged out.
And so map, obviously, topography. So with that map that I showed you guys before, we contour all these lines to create a DM or digital elevation model, which you see right here. And again, here the darker red are the higher elevations, and the blues are lower elevations here. And you see Bronx River corridor right here. Information, we can combine this and create a soils map, which will be essential in our eco-community modeling after. And then usually it's with what we found with the soils, combine our bedrock, our ocean, and our sociology to determine which soils were present where within our study area. So here we again have this trend of in lower valleys and in the bottom of valleys we have where and deals as well, but kind of more barren on the top of hills. Synthesize all the streams. So this is the stream network from the Bronx in 1609, and we also have ponds and lakes. So this is our swamp again. That's at the bottom of kind of a spot. And we also have our water wetlands. This is Westchester Creek right here. Lenape settlements. So most of the actual Lenape settlements were in the South Bronx here. We had one up in Moshulu, but most of them were on Classen Point and Hunts Point. But a lot of them were all connected through these networks of trails. So these are not exact, but from what we found in the literature and what we can, what the descriptions are, this is our best guess at where these networks of trails went through. Important part of our project is also to find all of the, or to catalog as many of the historical place names as we can for these features. So again, some of them are pretty colorful, like Suicide Hill right here, or like Daffodil Hill in the garden up here. So they're from different ages, but just having a centralized place where all these names can be found is a very valuable asset, especially when we're reading these descriptions. Information, we can generate eco-communities. So again, the ecological communities is when we create these ecological communities or ecological neighborhoods, it's a process of combining all this information, right? So if a valley has this type of soil and this type of exposure to the wind and all these other features, we know this plant or this animal will live there. So this allows us to create these neighborhoods and gives us a picture of the city back in 1609. The names of the some of them now, like Achinoke, Hickory Forest, etc. This is the actual breakdown of the communities in the Bronx Zoo in 1609. So a majority of it is Appalachian oak hickory forest, followed by hemlock, northern hardwood, and some other ones after that. They're in weird quantities. Get back to Eric.
Time for questions at the end. So onto all these map layers that Chris shows, then we try and map in the species distributions. So this is a work that's still in progress. It's something we'll be working on over the summer and into the fall. We make lists of all the plant animal observations, all the vertebrate animal observations in databases. We're trying to do this across the city at a citywide scale. We to generate a list of what we think the native vertebrate fauna were, the amphibians and reptiles and fish, mammals and birds, and then also the plants. And then we use a network representation to represent the habitat connections between all these species, between each other and between the aquatic parts of the environment. And then we basically put this network onto the map information that Chris showed to develop the probability maps in a spatial domain. Again, it wasn't really intended, but these representations of the habitat relationship has been really powerful for talking to people about why nature is resilient, how it's connected together, why it matters that you have all of the elements of nature here. It also helps you sort of frame the human part of it. You know, one of these nodes over here on the right is human beings. It's the Lenape people in Manhattan, but you know, human beings are one really important node in the overall network, but they're not the only node, and they're not even the center node, right? It's one part of a much larger system, and you know, I think this is actually a great metaphor for what we try and do in conservation, which is we try and help people see the connections between ourselves and everything else in nature and identify which are the most important connections to conserve. We know from the Manhattan work that there were 600 to 1,000 different plant species, native plant species, in the city 400 years ago, 85 different species of fish, freshwater fishes, saltwater fishes, anadromous fishes going back and forth. And this seems a good time to remember that there's now a fish ladder on the 182nd Street Dam at the south end of the zoo. There's been a couple of introductions of alewife herring, and the hope is that there'll be, once again, a really robust fish run on the Bronx River, the only freshwater river in New York City that happens to run right through the Bronx Zoo. 350 species of bird were once seen in New York City, many of which can still be seen in New York City and in the Bronx Zoo. If you think if you're a little migratory bird on the fall migration or the spring migration and you see the green spot that's the Bronx Zoo, you think that's not just a good place to go see, gorillas or lions or something, but actually that's a good place for you to live. Some of those species aren't with us anymore. This is the heath hen, which would have lived on those prairies that Chris mentioned before. Probably beavers on all the streams in the Bronx. They're, the story of Jose and beaver on the Bronx River today. This is a story of a community in the Bronx that worked to clean up the river, mostly for community ends, but it's actually paying back ecological benefits in a way that I think no one anticipated might happen. Of course, there were the big wildlife, which were not necessarily should come back to the city, but are an important part of the way the nature of the city worked. Wolves, bears, bobcat, river otter, whales and porpoise in the harbor. There's themes here that connect to the seascape and connect the upland to the marine realm. All in process, but in the meantime, we wanted to show you some of the great work that Jesse Moy has been doing on making some images of what the past environment looked like. So, hand over to Jesse.
So, as you mentioned, an important part of the conservation mission is connecting people to nature and to place. And in the absence of photographs of us in the field and live animals, the way that we've found to connect to the public is through images. So we're looking at Roosevelt, looking up the East River. You have Brooklyn on the right and Manhattan on the left. And I'm a little bit about the process of taking the information from the GIS and then images like this. So Christianed the digital elevation model as being the foundation of all of the modeling work. It's also the basis for these renderings. So on the left, you have the flat elevation model. So it's light areas correspond to high points and dark areas are low points in landscape. And you can bring that into rendering software and use it to displace a mesh, which is kind of like a net, pushing up the vertices where they're points and then dropping them where there are low points. And that creates a three-dimensional digital object you can then render. So on the right, you have a render of this area. We're rendering. So this process is taking the mapped ecological communities. So up in the left is a map of the distributions of different communities. Each color represents a different community. And then other squares are those isolated. And these are in the rendering software is they act like stencils. So they provide a way of applying textures or objects to different parts of the landscape in a controlled way. Without being each tree or each blade of grass individually. Renderings in a way that we constructed in the GIS. So we start with the elevation model on the left, and we add in the hydrography at sea level, and then add textures which are slope dependent or aspect dependent or elevation dependent. And of that, we can add vegetation. So each one of these could be just a diagram or for print. The products, like the one on the right, which is a planimetric of all of the vegetation, gives in something like a web map that's comparable to the one that's on Welikia.org right now. And then zoom and create these bird's eye views of anywhere in the city. So we're far from here, over the Bronx River corridor, looking north. Another thing that we've been experimenting with on just flat images and views are photos. So these are images that are rendered so that they can be stretched around a spherical digital space. And we're going to pass around some headsets so people can get a chance to look at them. So we're about 150 meters above the CGC. We're looking. So this is south, looking out to Long Island Sound, and you can see the shoreline of Queens. this is the area that Chris was describing earlier. And it wraps around as north. Out to the sea that if you squint, and then this is a wetland that was running on the former path of the Bronx River. So you can get a chance to look at those on the headsets also. Over here, we've built capacity to do these, to create these kinds of media products in our lab, and that ended up opportunities for collaboration. So next year, our former colleague Mario Giampieri collaborated with the Museum of the City of New York to produce an image that's paired with this photograph of Flushing, and is part of the New York Core exhibition, which is a permanent exhibit at the museum. So Flushing as it might have looked 400 years ago. Active collaboration with the Brooklyn Historical Society at their new location in Bow, on front at Empire Stores, and this exhibition called Waterlog is a record of how the waterfront, the Brooklyn waterfront, has changed, and we're getting renderings for them that are going to start about 20 years ago with the last glaciation, coming up to 1609. So an image of on the left is an image of Brooklyn Heights looking across the East River. And we're also working on a project with Google Expeditions, which is a virtual reality field trip software that is used to take kids who can't go on field trips to different places around the world, and they have a huge catalog of different trips, and it's a way of sharing this work and also providing an educational experience. So to organize, we're looking east. This is Roosevelt Island, Newtown, the wetlands. We're hovering above Onassis Reservoir. We're about 100 feet off the ground. Roosevelt Island, looking north towards inward in the Bronx. Here's New Jersey. So this is an example of a way that our rendered imagery can be combined with Air 360 imagery. So we are rendering of Manhattan as it was with current land, and this was taken by Google. It's looking south towards Lower Manhattan. And that's also getting passed around in the headset, I think. I've shared some stat images, and the photos are kind of the beginning of looking at ways that we can create more interactive experiences. And forward, we're trying to figure out how we can do and other ways of kind of engaging people with forms of media. And as of today, we've found a way that we can create animations, which are really expensive, so we can do it on the computers here in the lab, and they can be really compelling. So this is a video, a short demo of types of animations we're thinking of. We're looking sea level out at City Island. This is a subtype of City Island, and in the background you can see Hart Island. Yeah, this is sound is again produced by David and Bill at Cornell and the New School, I think. And I'm going to hand it back to Eric.
That's right. That's right. So, rain nurtures the environment. It's the base of life. So, just a little bit of a taste of what we've been trying to do. All the things we've demonstrated for the Bronx are things that eventually we want to be able to do for anywhere in the city, and in a kind of arbitrary way to get people to, touch a site or touch a map or, see something in an exhibition that would allow you to sort of transport yourself to the city as a wild place full of wildlife, and in a really compelling way that works from the science and the sort of intellect, but also works with the emotions and try to make that sort of connection to nature. And I think that's particularly important in a place like New York City and cities in general, because, of course, it hasn't stayed this way, right? A little bit more like this nowadays. Contrast of the wildest place with the least wild place or the most built-up place, I think, is also part of the tension that we can use. We see this work as sort of setting a frame, not just to understand the past and lament what's gone, but to help us plan over the future and actually to stretch our imaginations as individuals and communities and as a city, as a nation, to imagine what the future might hold. And at the end of Mannahatta, I worked with Heidi Nielsen, the artist I mentioned before, to help create some images to sort of provoke us to think about the long-term future. So we took this photograph in Madison Square Park, or in Madison Square, and we imagined that same landscape, say, 400 years from now. So without cars, but with streetcars and not, London plane trees in the park, but actually a red oak forest, streams instead of storm drains, but with art, still with architecture, still with people, still with that sort of urban, that vibrant urban life. So trying to imagine a version of the city that develops from where the city is today, but in a way that's more compatible with the ecological fundamentals of this place. Aims at a whole variety of scales. You can imagine the Upper East Side covered with green roofs on every building, and maybe a stream coming out of the reservoir, like the Saddle used to do, and wrap around and through the Upper East Side and down to the East River. Give an imagine sort of more radical explorations of different urban structures, of farmland that's close to the city, of wild places that are close to the city. And even in this image, the sea levels come up a meter. That's probably an underestimate, we would now, about what the future would hold. But actually, imagine a way that houses all the people that the city houses today, but in a way that would be sustainable for a really long time. And in a way, these sort of images at the end of Mannahatta have been some of the most discussed parts of the project, because I think it's because once you set up the whole story about the way the landscape of this region works, it gives people opportunities to think about why we have the structures we have today. Why are we all stuck in traffic and cars, and why is the subway system not working as well as it should, and why does our food have to fly from thousands of miles to get to us? How come we can't take advantage of the fertile places around us, including the seascape and the Hudson River Valley and Long Island and so forth? Why do we live in our particular way? It's not fixed in stone. It's actually something we can shape and adapt over time. So to do that, we had a little bit of funding to build a tool that allows everybody to do this. And so just here at the end, Kim's going to give us a short introduction to Vision Maker.
Hi, everyone. Like Eric said, just very briefly, I'll summarize kind of one way we're trying to operationalize this sense of bringing nature into the lived existence of we urbanites. The application, it's free, it's open. Anybody can go on and visionmaker.nyc, create an account, and when you to the application, you start with seeing New York City, and you immediately turn on and off the layers on the left there that show you the ecosystems of today, and also the ecosystems that were there 400 years ago. This is a preliminary version that we're working on revising now. And ecosystems are at a 10 by 10 meter scale and in the same palette, so you can compare apples to apples between the two time points. So it's part of to get people to think about the fabric of the urban and natural as holistic whole, not as a one other. zoom to any location. So if we were interested in the area near the Bronx Zoo, we could outline that area with that orange polygon that you see there. Get what's there now. So, the pink and purples are the buildings and the streets, and then there's some area in the Bronx Zoo. Look at what was there before. Again, this is kind of another representation of what you've been seeing from Chris and Jesse. Then make some vision. The hope here is to make a vision of what you would like to see in that area. So if you start with the ecosystems of today and painted some of the native forests where there are currently streets, what would that do? So you can play with this as much as you like, make different versions, and when you get something that you want to see the results for, you hit a little calculate button, and you can see sort of literally how you've moved the needle on the dial. So if you look, on the metric here, the stormwater overflow in 1609, the green dial represents how much overflow there was in 1609, which is 0 because it all went into the soil or went into streams and into the ocean. The brown dial shows how many gallons a day in a kind of moderate rain event go out today because of impervious surfaces and whatnot. So by painting some form to the streets, we've moved this orange dial that represents our region, literally a more sustainable direction. And we calculate a whole ton of metrics which are downloadable as a CSV, and I think it's 140 metrics that you can use to characterize your vision and compare that same area the way it was 400 years ago, the way it is today, and the way you would see it. So we've been using this both as a kind of ecological democracy tool for citizens to make arguments to their community board members or whatnot, as well as a pretty substantial education component that we've been doing with the educational department. So,
these are the kinds of things that the city government cares about. The stormwater flows, the carbon emissions, the species diversity, the population density, the economic ways, the cost of building things in the city. So this is really trying to connect, this sort of larger sense of ecology and natural history to the actual decision-making processes that are happening in the city, and in a direction that moves the whole city, hopefully, towards sustainability, and from the ground up, not from the top. And I have to say, I think that's really the power of this work. It's not to try and take me back to some romantic version of the past. It's really to try and pull some things out of the past and think about how do we make the future stronger and better into the future in a way that shapes the city. But as we know now, the city shapes the landscape around it, and indeed the whole world. So these things about how urban places and urban people are interacting with nature, I think are really the key to 21st century conservation. In addition to the kinds of things we do here in the zoos and the aquarium and the sort of global conservation program, but trying to put all these pieces together to move the world toward a better place that's sustainable for human beings and for all the wildlife of the world. So I'd like to thank you much for your kind attention and ask if you have any questions. Maybe you may put the light. John?
I just want to get a little bit more of how we move all this understanding into the planning process of New York City, New York, and how far along we are and what we need to urge that.
Right. Well, I think there's a couple things there. So there's a lot of people know about the work, and a lot of people know about Mannahatta, and people are more aware of Maker. There's a potential creation with the participatory budgeting movement in New York City. City council members provide money to constituents, and then they have a structured way of deciding how that money gets spent, and that could be envisioned or managed through Maker. But the sort of larger issue is really to try and make statements so that everyone in New York City thinks of this place as a natural place, and that they have a place to go where they could have these kind of immersive experiences that we've been taught that are sort of connected in a kind of modern 21st century multimedia sort of way. It's really the kinds of things that this institution was founded to do, and we're trying to create the processes to make that happen. So I see it, there's kind of interactions at the highest levels with the city, with the city government and with the mayor and, with the on our trustees, that sort of thing, those kind of ways the city works. But there's also this sort of ground up way that the city works. And I think what we just talked about, mostly we talked about the outer boroughs, and that's really deliberate, that works with the idea of providing this kind of information to everybody in the city, no matter if poor or rich or which neighborhood you live in. Everybody should have this. Liz? Yeah. Oh. Yeah. Discussions are still ongoing, and quite contentious, actually. Quite contentious. The issues about retreat from shoreline versus staying on the shoreline and building up. And we have our own version of that with the aquarium, don't we? Yeah, it was just somebody know the Regional Plan Association. They're a nonprofit that every 25 years makes a plan for the region and come out with their 4th regional plan in the fall. And they hired a series of design teams to create design ideas for different parts of the region, including a team that was working on the Bight. And I've been involved with the critical reviews for those. And they're proposing what do they call it? Sort of receive, protect, and I forget what it is. But anyway, the idea of creating these sort of exchange networks, so so that people don't live, say, on the Rockaways, but then a larger and more robust city is created on the northern edge of Jamaica Bay to house them. So it's still within the sort of same range, but they're also getting better housing, better jobs, better economy, and then this recreational resource on the beach's edge. Let's just say there are a lot of people talking about pouring cement. And, from a conservation perspective, the kinds of monies they talk about are just enormous. I gave a talk about the plan for the Jamaica Bay Rockaway area plan, which is a $3.8 billion plan. Actually, I saw the budget, and indirect is on a $3.8 billion plan, $166 million. So, I mean, you could just get 1/10 of 1% of that, to get them to think just for a second about the nature of what they're doing, informative for us and maybe actually for the city itself. Yeah. Todd?
Do you see? Do you have any ideas about how this work might influence management decisions that be made for WCS's property or the city? Bronx Zoo?
You talk about that very much, but another place this work's really been picked up is in a kind of conservation community of New York City. Or to something called the Natural Areas Conservancy, which is a public-private partnership that's trying to work on the conservation and restoration of the 10,000 acres of wildlands in New York City. Areas that, if you look at the former maps, were like the developed parts of the parkland, and people actually realize that those areas have a lot of value, and providing that they need support. So and we're working as part of a collaborative agency on a natural goals process, right? To set conservation goals for the city. But so I think it could help us manage the grounds here in a more sustainable way, and actually as a wild place, because it is actually one of the wildest places in the Bronx. But I think there's another potential advantage in this work, which is I know that we're always looking for ways to drive attendance, and this is a really unique set of assets that nobody has that could be used in a sort of exhibition kind of setting potentially someday here at the Bronx Zoo, and reach out to the 4 million people that live in the tri-state area and tell them something they never knew and had never seen about the places they live. Oh, no. Thank you.
How are you, JP? Right. Really excited to see up in the Bronx. And I'm curious, have you guys done evaluation work of for people who have experienced NAPA or Welikia through the various sort of interactive activities, whether it's digital components or educational components, to see how their environmental or perhaps pro-environmental attitudes may not have changed as a result of that? Because I'm thinking about, digital experiences and cartographic experiences versus, the actual out in the field experience.
Right. I think the only formal evaluation we've had is through our collaborations with you guys in the education department, mostly around Vision Maker. We just finished a 2-year round of work with the education department in Vision Maker to 40 junior high schools and high schools around New York City in all 5 boroughs. And we did a formal evaluation with the teachers and some things with the students as well. And in general, people really liked it. They really liked this sort of way of thinking, and they really liked the sort of place-basedness of it. People, you can zoom into the block where your school is, and then see what's going on, in this digital way. But then, a lot of the teachers would take their kids outside the school and actually point out, well, that's a bioswale. This is where a tree is. You saw street trees on the map. Where are the street trees now? This sort of thing. And there's an impervious surface. Well, that road and that sidewalk and your playground and this building, like actually trying to make these connections. And we also, that program was not designed in a didactic way, in the sense like you have to use it this way. It was more, we're going to show these things that we built, and we want to talk to you about how you might use these in your classroom. And I think that's been really successful. And it's about to apply to NSF again for another round of funding to try and make sort of kind of a version of Vision Maker that could be working with this more advanced kind of version that we have now. But it all built up out of that sort of historical ecology work that we've been doing for almost 20 years now. Heidi?
So, speaking of the historical ecology, I was struck this time to think about this, thinking about the Northern Forest Atlas project that you're doing. I'm wondering, well, I guess the first question was the habitat types that you use. Are those from a standard list, like
the ecological community guide that the Heritage Program uses?
Yeah, because there is also this stuff before doing that same thing, looking at the underlying geology, superficial geology, building communities on top of that. I think there could be some ways to do this project. Very useful, tailoring off those work
Yeah.
second life for it down the road.
Yeah, I like that. I wish 1/10 of the natural history knowledge that Jerry has. yeah, that's right. I mean, these themes, and this is all sort of set in the urban context in New York City, but these ideas resonate sort of across all kinds of landscapes, right? And I think this sort of modality of seeing, is something that can apply to other cities. We've been trying to San Francisco project started, and we have an idea for a Jerusalem project in Israel, and we have an idea for a London project. There's lots of fertile things going on. And then, as Heidel knows, the Vision Maker framework is designed to be able to be portable to different places. You swap out the ecosystems, you change lifestyle, you change the climate scenarios, and then ecosystem service models would run the same way. Yeah. Models that people know about from the TNC and WWF and Stanford developed for a long time, whereas those are all kind of black boxy GIS models. This is distributed through the internet and specific to your place, and something that kids can use and experts can use. Yeah. Other questions? Problems? Yeah. To see the viewers? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you much for coming then. And I just want to thank my team for all the work they put in, many long hours. So.